Alright, welcome to our video looking at file handling. So what we're going to explore today is how to open a text file and then be able to use its contents within Python. The context of what we're looking at for this video is our school planner project that we've been working on previously. And what we're going to do is create a little system where rather than having to import each table one at a time, it's going to allow us to import all of our tables at the same time. So currently, as you can see, when we initialize our database, we run a single SQL statement. We then connect and add some data into that table. But if we do have a look at our class diagram, which shows the objects, you can see that we've got a few objects there. So we've got the assessment task, the user account, and homework tasks as well. Alright, so from that I've derived some SQL. You might notice that I've only got two tables here. I did combine the tasks together. When you look at the similarities, it makes a lot more sense to do so that way. So what we want to do is basically take all this text, which is our SQL statements, pass it into our Python program, split them up so that we have access to each statement, and then we use a loop to just run the create table for each one. Obviously with two tables, it might not seem the most efficient, but obviously the bigger your system and the more tables you have, the more this will benefit you going forward. And ultimately, as we said, it's really just about taking this text and passing it in. So we don't have to, constantly type multi-line comments for every SQL statement. We can have them prepared beforehand and then bring them in. All right, or I guess if we think about it in a real-world context, we may employ someone on our behalf to write some of the SQL, and then we can just plug it and play it into our system. Excuse me there. So we're just going to use the School Planner project in our database library because I guess we're going to use this for creating our databases going forward. And so we're going to create a method, and I'm just going to call it read SQL. So the job of this is really just to read in the SQL. And then when we initialize the database is when we will run it through. So we will ask for a file name. So we need to know which file we're going to read in. And I'll just pause for a second while we think about what we need to do. Control S, remember, constantly save as you go. So what we need to do in order to read the SQLs, first of all, we need to find the file. We then need to open it, and we then need to read the contents of it. So by reading it in, it will allow us to then start using it in the Python file or the Python program. All right, and so to locate the file, we're going to use a similar system to when we created our connection. We don't need to initialize a connection variable, but we do need to locate the file. So we're going to identify the base directory as being in the path of the directory name and under file. So basically what we're saying here is find the directory or the file path of the current file we're in, so the db.py, because our SQL is going to be stored in the same location. So we're going to basically just say grab it from this spot. So our file path, so in the previous method we called it db path for database. This is obviously a file. So again, we want the path, and we're going to join together the base directory, so our current file location, as well as the file name. So when we call it, will be under dbsql.txt. All right, so this should allow us to access that. We could print the file path just to check. It's always good to check as we accomplish something. Right. And so just to save us a bit of drama, because currently we don't want to do on our whole program, I'm just going to call the read SQL down here. So read SQL, and our file is called dbsql.txt. I don't know if I actually mentioned that. I will quickly bring it up so you can see the file name there. And this is saved in the same location. I'll just bring that across just to prove it's all there in the same folder. I'll get that back out of the way and just minimize that. All right, so let's save. And because we've called this method down here, we can run it in the DB file. We don't have to go back to the main Python file, but this is all that will happen is we just want to check that the file path's been set correctly. All right, so you can see it's run, and down here you've got the file path and dbsql.txt. All right, so that will find the file, which is ideally what we want. Just a bit nice. So we've successfully located our file. Now we want to look into the file. All right. So to do this, there's a few file handling methods. And the first one we want to use is open. So we're creating an object called F, so F the file. All right, so if we open the file path, basically this will open the file in Python so we can use it. And to start with, let's just read it. So f.read. So for the file, we're running the read method. So it should print out the contents of this file. Let's save and we'll run it again just here. There we go. So that looks like what we had in the file. So you can see the file path still there. But now we also have all the SQL. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So SQL, create table, counts, create table for tasks. So that matches what we have here. So we've successfully read the file into our Python program. All right, so now that we've read that in, what we want to do is we want to separate these SQL statements so that we can access them. All right, so to do that, we're just going to create a method or a variable, sorry, called SQL list. So this is just going to be a list of our SQL statements stacked on top of each other. And how we want to access those is we say f.read, so we want to read what's in the file. But then we also want to split it. So the split method is something we can apply to lists, strings, other things where essentially it takes the text and splits it up. So if we left it like this, it would split it all up into individual characters. That's not quite what we want. What we want to do is we want it to identify that at the end of each of our SQL statements, there's a semicolon. So this isn't probably something I've discussed in class previously, but a lot of SQL languages and variations do require a semicolon at the end of each statement as like a closing the statement. Python and SQLite has a little bit more flexibility in give, which is why we haven't considered it up to this point. But we can take advantage of this fact and actually tell our Python file or Python program to look for that semicolon and split the text based on that. So inside the parentheses for our split method, we just use the quotes and semicolon. So it'll just look at semicolon, and that's like how we parse it into its different parts. All right, so then once we've done that, we want to read, see what we've done. We'll just get it to print out our SQL list. So I'll just comment them out because we know they work. And we'll give it a run. Okay, so you can see here we've got a list because we've got the open, the square brackets, I should say. And then we've got create table, if not exists account, parentheses. So the /n just refers to a new line because we put everything on a new line. /t meaning tab, so we tabbed it inwards. We could, in theory, just list all this out one after the other and be okay, but we like to format our SQL so that it's easy to read. All right, and you'll see once we get to the end of our SQL statement with our end parentheses here, it's the single quote to end that particular element, and then we start our new SQL statement. So create table and so on and so forth. It does say there's another one there, but that's fine. We can probably ignore that. We might have to cut that off if need be. We'll see how we go. But we now successfully have our SQL list. We want to take this, iterate through when we initialize our database. So what we're going to do is move into the initialize DB. So, you know, we've successfully written the SQL. We've done what we need to do with this method, so that one's complete. I'll just leave the print SQL list there because we may need to access it. Oh, that might not do. So I'm going to cut, yeah, we'll cut that. And I'm going to put it here. So the first thing we want to do when we initialize the database is read the SQL from the file. And so if we have a look at what we currently have, you can see what we do is we set our table SQL, data SQL. We might actually, I'll just comment that out for the time being. Let's do that one much more so it's not confused. So we're not going to worry about data SQL. We're just going to purely focus on creating the table. So currently what we do is we set our SQL, we then, I don't need the initial value, we then create the table. So with our connection, which is passed in with the method, and our table SQL. So what we want to be able to do is to take our SQL from this and iterate through to create each table. So I just realized the one thing we forgot to do with our read SQL is we obviously printed it out, but we want to return that. So we want to return SQL list. So then what we can do is we can access it in here as a variable. So SQL list is equal to us running that method. And so then for SQL in SQL underscore list, and then we just want to create that. So create table with our connection and our SQL. Sorry, comma SQL. So actually, now that we've got that, I'm going to comment out that also. A few comments here. Once this is up and running, we can probably actually remove this. Alright, so our SQL statements are now coming from this file, and we're reading in the SQL. And then for each SQL statement in that list, we should be creating a table. So let's save it. Alright, so if we go back to our main Python file, which is where we run our initializing database. So you can see at the moment what we do is we create a connection by connecting to users.db. So currently, as it stands, we do have a table called logins that we created previously. We'll add the tables in here for now, and then probably what we'll do is we'll remove the logins tables. Then we have to change some of the other SQL within our application, but that's all right. The alternative is we could create a separate database and continue on our merry way with this. But I know we created this database purely just for testing purposes. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll probably go with this database and we'll make the changes in a future video. So we're going to create the connection to this. We're going to initialize the database, which means it's going to look at adding in those new tables, and then it's going to run our application, assuming it all goes to plan. So let's give it a play. So you can see there it printed the SQL statement, which is showing us that it read the SQL in. All right, and then on my other screen, the app has run, which means it looks like everything has worked, but the true test is by checking our database. It still says one table. So refresh. Let's close it and open it. See if that affects it. There we go, lovely. So now we've got three tables. We have our logins table, but it's now created the accounts table and the tasks table. We have a look at the data. So our accounts has username, password, name, and type. Our tasks has ID, subject, title, everything we had there. So fantastic. So you can see with that one function call, we've created multiple SQL tables. And that's mostly due to the ability of being able to read in our Python files. So as I said, we might remove this now. It's not really part of our solution. So obviously you could go in and replace this DB SQL text with anything. So we might just quickly refactor that before we wrap up. So what we'll do here is we'll say file name. It's not what we had up above. Say file name. Yeah. So the only change we would have to make with that is in our main method. So we've got our connects, then we would say DB SQL txt. That's giving me problems. Connection is not defined. Oh, because there we go. Right, so yeah, we might just do a quick test this again. So what I'll do just to see if it does work is I'm going to delete the accounts table. Alright, so when we rerun this and refresh, we should find that the accounts table pops back up. The tasks won't be affected because the create table only runs if it doesn't already exist. The other option is we could go in and actually tweak the SQL, but given that we want to start looking at polishing in our application going forward, we'll ignore that. So now we've got the changes made. Let's give it another play. I need to close the previous instance. SQL's popped up, applications popped up, which is good to see. Close. No, that's right. Open, because it should already have changed for us. There we go. So you can see our accounts are back in there where they belong. All right. So yeah, so I guess a little trick using a bit of file handling to read in a bunch of SQL and have it run at the same time. So thanks very much and catch you in the next video.